You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Fast ship. Never heard of the William Falcon?
Should I have?
It's a ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs.
What a piece of junk!
Covering Star Wars vehicles in less than 12 parsecs, this is Start Your Engines.
Don't get technical with me.
Here are your hosts, Paul Naylor and Mark Newbold.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Celebration. Big round of applause for yourselves. Thanks for coming to join us. We know there's loads of stuff going on and loads of things to see, so we do appreciate you being here very, very much. I'm Mark.
I'm Paul.
There you go. I'm glad you know your name. We're here to talk about spaceships and starships and cruisers and speeders and all sorts of stuff. We're part of Fantha Tracks. We're on the Fantha Tracks radio network. We are Start Your Engines, and every episode we pick a ship. And, I mean, you guys know this because this is now recording, but it wasn't recording, and I've kind of explained this all, but I'm going to say it again because I'm vamping. We decided that this episode, this live episode, our first live episode at Celebration,
yes,
that we would talk about the Lambda-Class Shuttle. And if anybody listens to the show, I don't know if any of you do, or whether you just like the comfy seats, but we do tend to go through all the techie, statty stuff first, and then hit the memories, because there's lots of memories attached to these classic vehicles.
I mean, let's be honest, you basically do all the background stuff and I just chip in oohs, ahs, and I didn't know that.
Well, yeah, that helps. That helps.
Does help, yeah.
It all helps. And of course, Return of the Jedi, 40th anniversary, it's the big year for that film, and it seemed logical to pick a vehicle from Return of the Jedi. So, we've got more people coming in. I love it. Welcome. We thought we'd talk about the Lambda-Class Shuttle. We'll get the techie stuff out of the way and then we'll dive in. It's the T-4a Shuttle, which sounds like a departure lounge at some airport. It's Sign-Off Fleet Systems. It's a Lambda-Class T-4a...
Sorry, what class?
T-4a Shuttle. No. Lambda-Class.
Oh, sorry.
Not Lambada-Class, you muppet.
My mistake, my bad.
Dude.
Sorry, pal.
It's okay. Multi-purpose transport. So, well done. I didn't know you were going to do that. Well done. Multi-purpose transport, 140,000 credits. So first batch of techie stuff out of the way. So it's a transport. We don't generally see this vehicle in any kind of, other than escort stuff. You see the Emperor come on it. You see Vader arrive on Endor in it. You've seen a blown to bits one in Mandalorian. Yeah. You don't tend to see it in battle often, do you?
No. I mean... We'll probably talk about our favourite appearances of it.
Absolutely.
In a short while. But yeah, I mean, it seems very much like it's transportation from a planet to a space station or from one planet to another planet. But yeah, I don't think... Is it heavily weaponised?
It is. It is. Strangely, I didn't realise this. We'll skip around. Armament's got 5 laser cannons, so 2 Tamer backs, twin rotating blaster, 1 Armec RZ-70 I can't read. Retractable double blaster cannon. That's irrelevant, really, because you never see it. I've never seen an Imperial Shuttle fire anything.
No. All I know is that the wings fold up when it lands.
So, when you first see that ship in Return of the Jedi, you've seen shuttle. You see that shuttle in Empire Strikes Back when Captain Neely gets his final moment.
In the special edition.
Well, that was the thing. You see, you kind of work it back into the special edition. That always bugged me back in the day when that came out. I say back in the day, '97. But when that came out, and they dropped that the Jedi version of the ship back into the film in those sequences, especially at the end. You liked it.
I really liked that. Yeah.
I never liked it.
Yeah.
Why did you like it?
I liked it.
And why are you wrong?
I liked it because I think... Am I right in saying that's the first time we saw the hangar of a Star Destroyer?
That's a good question. Yeah. I think possibly, yeah. So, apart from the underside when you see it in the Devastator at the start.
So it lands in the hangar bay of the Star Destroyer and Vader comes down the ramp. There's nobody else about. Literally, Vader walks down the ramp. And it's just got that sort of continuity with the Death Star.
Yeah.
In Return of the Jedi. And
I just why, though?
That just because it's a used scene, a cut scene from Return of the Jedi.
There is a bit of it I like. It's that old West End Games idea of let's use all the unused Ralph McQuarrie stuff and put it into a book and make everything that he did something anyway.
Yeah, but for me it worked. It gave that Imperial aesthetic, it gave that continuity, that if we're going to do a Death Star this way, it makes sense that the hangar bay of a Star Destroyer is going to look very similar. So yeah, I like that. I mean, if I remember the original version of the shuttle, which you see very briefly zip through the sky, it looked like a... Tin of pilchards.
It was just a box, wasn't
Yeah.
it? But I think when they sort of zoomed in and did a bit more detail, it was like a TIE bomber, but with the wings sort of facing slightly the other way.
Right,
There was more
okay.
to it than you realised.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, I liked it. It was one thing that pulled the two films closer together.
20 metres in length, maximum atmospheric speed, 850 kilometres an hour. I don't know what that is in real speed. I'd say about 600 miles an hour. I say real speed. 2 engine units, so it's got sublight engine, so it can go. It's hyperdrive capable. It's got short range sensors.
Yeah.
But basically, it's not a ship you're going to take into a battle. It's an escort ship, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is. And what were your first impressions when you saw it at the beginning of Return of the Jedi? Did you think this fits in with
Yeah.
the Empire's fleet? Could you see it being part of that?
I think I loved it because when it first turned up in Jedi and you see it drop out of the Star Destroyer and the whole sequence, the way it's framed and the way it's shot, and you see the Death Star, because it's a new vehicle, and back then you weren't getting new vehicles every week with a TV show or new vehicles all the time with comics and stuff.
Yeah.
It was a big deal to get that. But it just made me think of the Skyhopper, Luke playing with his Skyhopper. So you'd had tri-winged vehicles in Star Wars before, but it still felt fresh and new. And I still think of all the tri-winged vehicles that we've had, and there's been plenty of them, it's still the best looking one.
Yeah. Well, as a kid, by the time the Shuttle Tidarium came out from Kenner/Palatoy, I was of an age where I was more interested in young ladies than I was in Star Wars. So I'd sort of come away. I know, to my detriment. So I'd come away from the collecting side of things. I did have is it the ISP-6?
Oh, the ISP-6
the
was
very
the little
mini
mini rig.
version, the mini rig version, which is quite cute, and I've still got that. But yeah, as a toy, I can remember my cousin having it. It was huge.
It was massive.
Huge thing.
I think it was.
And am I right in thinking? I'm pretty sure I've seen somewhere on YouTube. Didn't somebody convert one of those to be flyable?
Oh yeah, there's a
remote
drone
control.
version of it.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to have done that.
Oh, yeah.
And the wings actually go fly out. So, I mean, that would be really cool to have.
I think also in the Marvel adaptation of Return of the Jedi, it was one of the first things you see in that sequence. And it was beautifully drawn. It was Goodwin and Williamson doing the work on that adaptation, like they'd done Empire, and it just looked phenomenal.
Yeah.
The ship just looked great from every angle. Because a lot of vehicles don't look good from every angle.
True.
You know, I'll mention, I do this on every episode, so forgive me, please. In Star Trek, there's certain ships that look really good from certain angles and look horrible from others. The Enterprise D looks horrible from some angles, but amazing from others. But
That means absolutely nothing to me. I haven't got a clue what I've heard of Star Trek.
Well done. Yeah. But the Shuttle Tidarium looks great from every angle. And again, you go back to it in Rogue One, don't you? You see the bigger, sort of more cargo-heavy version of that.
Yeah, the more beefed-up, chunky version. Yeah. But, so what is your favourite scene then that you see it in?
Oh, it's that opening sequence when it drops out of the Star Destroyer and just majestic. It's majestic. It's like a swan.
Yeah.
That's my best analogy of Star Wars vehicles. It's got that grace about it.
So mine, I suppose, is, like I said, from The Empire Strikes Back. But also, I think I'm right in saying that when you see it in Jedi, when it lands on the platform, you've got the radar dish, it lands on the platform, and then there's that one instance in Jedi where you see an AT-AT walker.
Yeah.
So that, in its own right, I always think of that and... an AT-AT walker. Got to do absolutely zip.
You're easily excited, aren't you?
Got to do nothing. But it was just nice to see it in that film because it's a blink and you miss it AT-AT walker moment. And then what happens? Darth Vader walks down the ramp. And for those of you that don't know, they actually misjudged the actual filming of that.
Thing is, if they'd have had the banging his head on the door moment, right, like Django does in Attack of the Clones, which was that nice little workaround, you know, might have stole the moment from meeting Luke and giving him a bit of grief. But he literally walks to the matte painting, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I'll give him that. One mistake in it.
Did they correct that for the special edition?
I don't think they did.
No,
and they shouldn't.
No. I don't know if anybody's heard, but Return of the Jedi is going to be back in the theatres as well in May. So that's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm stoked for that. Yeah, round of applause.
Yeah. So I'm well up for that. Should we have a lads' night out?
Lads' night out sounds like a plan.
That, yeah.
Sounds like a plan. Any chance to see Jedi in the theatres? And of course, I say Jedi being the anniversary film, I know our conversation's going to migrate to all sorts of places. Speaking of migrating, there is somebody in the room I would very much like to bring up onto the stage because do porgs migrate? Do you know if porgs migrate? Well, that's blown that link. But we've got Jake Lunt Davies in the room. I'll let you explain what you've done. But please, big round of applause.
Hello.
Explain to these fine people your involvement. I'm still clapping my hands then. It was making a noise.
Keep it going.
Throw me a fish. The depth
Who
of
am I?
work. Who are you? What have you done? Why are you here?
Well, I work for Neil Scanlon's CFX Creature Effects crew, which is nothing to do with spaceships, I'm afraid. There is a small connection.
It's everything to do with awesome, though.
Yeah. And I was a concept designer for Creature Effects, and I did BB-8, and I did the Porgs, which is why Mark's talking about Porgs.
Yes.
And I did Ray's Speeder, which is my little foray out of creatures into art department and design the Ray's Speeder.
That was my link, you said.
Oh, sorry.
No. My link was going to be I was going to go from Return the Jedi to speeder bikes, and then speeder bikes to Magnum ice cream bars, and then Magnum ice cream bars to Ray's Speeder. That was my seamless link.
Yes.
Well, it would be very remiss of us not to talk a bit about Ray's Speeder, seeing as you're here.
Yes, let's talk about
Talk
Ray's...
us through the process, the thought process.
Well, Ray's Speeder was... That's loud. Ray's Speeder... He bellows Ray's Speeder. I was working, as I say, for Neil on Force Awakens, and we'd about a year into... I mean, we were on it for so long, but maybe about 6 months into it. We'd already got BB-8 rolling, as they say. That was underway. We'd had a lot of droids being made, and JJ had the art department doing spaceships and vehicles. And for whatever reason, the designs that they were coming up with weren't what JJ wanted. And he sort of said, well, look, you've done droids, you've done hard surfaces. Can your guy... This is to Neil, not to me. I'm just lower down the pecking order. And he was like, could your guys have a go at, having a Ray's Speeder? So there were 4 of us on the team, and we all had a go at it and presented to Darren Gifford and Rick Carter, who are the production designers. And they were like, oh, yeah, those are quite exciting. And they took it on to JJ, and he loved some sketches that I did, which were these sort of, as Mark says, they're like Magnum bars, basically. But the thing about Star Wars designs, what I've found is there's so many designs in Star Wars which are so simple. There's a simplicity to it. But, and a kid can draw. Anyone who can't draw can draw a TIE fighter or an X-wing. They're really easy to draw. And I think a lot of people, not say I know this, it's generally realised in Star Wars and design everywhere. The simpler a design, the better. And if it beds itself into your mind and you can draw it. So it's stuff like, BB-8 was already easy to draw and iconic, and R2-D2, X-wings, whatever. So I was thinking, well, let's just do something really simple. And what I was influenced by were, old-fashioned tractors. Yeah. Those ones from the sort of 40s and 50s. Yeah. No cab, no mud guards.
Exposed engine.
A lot. I mean, basically, if you take an old-fashioned 50s, 40s tractor and take the wheels off, you've got most of Ray's Speeder. Even when I was putting those sort of horrible metal saddles on it, art department did change that to that horse saddle, which was quite cool. So that's all it was. And I also like to think as a little nod to Luke's Landspeeder, because again, that's a very simple design. If you just turn Luke's Landspeeder on its end,
I thought that.
It's halfway there.
We've got a picture of one on the screen.
Again, the colours, I was really riffing off the Landspeeder. It's orange with some cool stripes.
So when you're designing, I mean, obviously you want to go. I mean, John Muller was the same with the characters, wasn't he? Going for the silhouettes, making it as striking as possible.
Yeah.
That's always primary thought in the process.
Well, it's part of it, not primary, but it's there. Yeah. You're sort of thinking, will it work as a silhouette? Will it work as a simple line drawing? Yes, definitely.
So when you go from seeing it on the page and then you see it coming to life, and we'll talk about some of the other stuff you've done, how close is it? How can you recognise it? You're seeing it in 3D now, so whereas you're presumably starting off in 2D. So.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not very 3D. It stops at 2D for me, and then sculptors and model makers take over. But with CFX, we were in the fortunate position that and what Neil wanted from us is that we were always there in-house to sort of be part of right at the start. Neil could sort of judge whether things were going to be achievable. We can always have conversations with puppeteers and performers to find out what is achievable. You don't just creating some crazy thing which no one can make, because they want to do it all practically as much as possible. So it was always from the outset driven by can we put a man in this costume or whatever. Yeah. And we would then go on to art direct it through. So all the way through, we were always going down to the sculpting room, we're always going down to the animatronics guys and the costume people, and keeping an eye on it. And it always ends up, pretty well how you like it. I mean, the speeder was taken out of my... It went off to art department and they do their thing. So it kind of appeared. It was like, oh, they've even put the dent in. Fantastic.
Oh, you drew the dent?
I think they did. Well,
Well, I know technically Start Your Engines is about vehicles, but
Yes.
I suppose a droid has an engine, doesn't it?
Of course it does.
So, I mean, this gentleman is responsible for the look of BB-8, but also, more recently, B2 Emo.
B2 Emo,
Yeah.
My one and only contribution to Andor. Thank you.
Two of the most lovable droids in the saga. And this
What about Dio?
About who, sorry?
Dio.
Don't say who. Don't say
Dio?
Yes.
Weren't they a
Dio.
rock band? No, Dio too, absolutely, yeah. I forgot about Dio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Talk to us a bit more about B2 Emo. How did that all come about? Because he's quite a sort of, he's quite different from an astromech.
Yeah, I mean, the brief there was they wanted a sort of tenacious bulldog character, which I kind of explored ideas which I don't think visually necessarily come across. Although he has a sturdiness to him, I suppose. He's very heavy, and we were looking at industrial sort of diggers and big industrial things that had a sort of weight to them. He had to start off as being old. He started off, I think you saw him new when Cassian was young,
Yes,
and then he ages over the years. And so we did various, here he is old with his yellow replacement part. That idea of like replacing, it's almost the same, and it's not quite matching. It nearly matches.
Yeah.
And then the other part of the brief was Swiss Army knife.
Okay.
Yeah.
End of brief.
Yeah. That's all we're giving you. That's it.
So they wanted this. I don't know. It really came across in the series that the idea was that I don't know if you've seen him move. He's got these sort of rotating barrels of things, and they do actually slide up and down, and little flaps open, and he can theoretically produce a, I don't know, tool or whatever it is.
Like a little 3D printer, or they're all held within him, or
Yeah, they're all little, toolboxes or I don't know, useful stuff.
Yeah.
It was never really but it's all worked. It's all there, and you can spin around in a sort of it's like a barrel, like a magazine full of handy gadgets, like a Swiss Army knife. As you can pull the knife out.
I'm going to put this thought in everybody's head now, and they'll never forget this now. Okay, so I've always thought if droids could have babies, he would be the love child of Vincent from Black Hole. And Wally.
Yes. I mean, I've had Vincent being said to me a lot. He has that. Again, I suppose, so I don't think I even consciously thought about that, but in hindsight, it probably was a big subliminal... It
sinks in, doesn't it?
I love that droid.
Yeah.
So.
And when you're designing droids, I mean, they're characters. I mean, there's a mechanical aspect which kind of folds in with what we talk about, but they are characters. And BB-8 couldn't have more character. And then B2 turns up, and it's like he's got more character than anybody you could picture. So how do you, when you start, is it a technical thing? Is it an organic thing, if that makes any sense? Because you want to create something that's got a bit of personality about it?
Yes, I try to think how to answer that. I mean, so much of the personality and character then gets brought in by the puppeteer. And I do think about character, and I do quite often draw little character sheets, almost like in animation.
Yeah.
I'll just draw, them it's like animation overly reacting to things. I remember doing it on Dio specifically. I just drew this whole sheet of like Dio looking surprised and Dio looking sad, and they were very extreme sketches.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to explore, even at that very early stage, what a performer might be able to do further down the line. And I don't know, maybe they looked at those drawings and went, yes, you can.
And I suppose as well, with the announcement of the new Daisy Ridley led film, set 15 years after the sequel trilogy, there's every likelihood that we will get the return of BB-8 and Dio.
Yes, well, I would hope BB-8
another.
would carry on. I don't know where Dio fits into the end.
Who knows?
Isn't Dio like BB-8's?
BB-8's pet.
Yeah. I know what you're going to say.
So of all the other work that you've worked, I mean, obviously the Porgs, I mean, that's that kind of the gimmick to bring you up, but there was quite a design process in that, because in real life there's this island,
all these
in the Atlantic,
puffins,
and all these puffins on it, and you've got to make something of that. So how did that process begin? Because you have got a starting point there.
Yeah, again, very simple. It started off with the caretakers because Ryan was inspired by the puffins. He went, I want puffin people. Nuns.
They look more like
End of
dolphins.
brief. That was it. So,
My mind went somewhere else then.
yeah. So I drew a lot of them, and they were all very based on puffins. And then it was, can you do some pork? You know, we've got these puffins everywhere. And the Skellig Michael is a UNESCO heritage site.
Yeah.
And it's a breeding ground for puffins, and you can't touch the puffins. You can't get rid of they're always there.
Yeah.
You work around the puffins.
Yeah.
So you do see in some wide shots, there are little things flying around, and I think in some of the deep background there are probably puffins. And Ryan was thinking, well, I've got to work with these somehow and kind of assimilate them into the story, or at least assimilate them into the world.
Yeah.
So he said, look, could we have something that's puffin-like, but not, an alien puffin? So that would set the scale, which is why they're kind of that size.
Yeah.
And they were originally intended just to sort of be dotted around in the background as just to justify the wider shots, really.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a cynical view that they were created as sort of marketing things. I think no. They weren't. They were just going to fill the background. But they kind of got escalated, you see. And then Ryan saw them and was like, oh, actually, we could do some fun stuff, So there's the bit with the lightsaber where they're sort of plonking their, dangerously hitting the lightsaber.
I still think there's an ILM Christmas special somewhere where it actually ignites that saber.
Yeah. You haven't seen that bit of concept art I did?
No.
There's it's in the book. It's in the art of book.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I just drew it. It's like it's a porg getting its brains blown out. It's what if they had pressed the button.
Oh,
I
put the circle gun, do that.
Right, and it was I kind of hesitantly presented it just for a bit of fun, thinking I don't know if I'm treading on toes or stepping over a certain unwritten line, but it was fine. They laughed. It made it into the art of.
That's the best thing. That's the best thing. So there's BB-8 in one film, there's Porgs in another film, there's B2 in another film.
Yes.
You're on a pretty decent run there.
I have had a good
relatable characters.
Yeah. I've done quite well, really. I think.
Yeah.
I'm quite pleased.
Just
with
to say, the reason Porgs works in this conversation is that Porgs poo on all the ships. That's the link to start your engine.
And they destroy they took apart the Millennium Falcon, didn't they?
Yeah.
They ripped that
Oh,
apart.
they're nesting, don't they?
And they're pulling their seat covers off. Ruined it.
It's like a Faith No More concert. So you can't obviously hint or say of what you're working on at the moment in any field or IP, but still busy, still plenty going on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not doing it right now. I'm not working on Star Wars, but I did some bits last year. But I'm doing Venom at the moment.
Oh, fantastic! Brilliant.
Different franchise altogether.
Without telling anything about it, what's the shift like going from a space fantasy scenario like Star Wars to moving across to a Marvel Universe thing, which has got different.
It's different because on Star Wars I was concept artist and concept designer, so that was at the moment I'm a storyboard artist as well. So it's a totally different. I'm working with directors talking about filmmaking and shots and cameras and. Yeah. Totally different. So it's
fascinating because for the general wider world, we all got to know all about storyboards, especially the older members of the crowd, through Star Wars. That was the first time we'd ever even thought of a storyboard, just seeing what you saw in the New Hope. So it must be kind of cool in a different world, but sort of doing stuff like that. I suppose the process is different now, isn't it?
I still have to draw, but I draw digitally, but it's still drawing. But no, it's interesting. You're working at the very thick end, the heart of filmmaking, which is slightly different to the design work where you're a little bit removed and but no, it's really good.
And if you had to pick, as I know you've got to shoot, but if you had to pick one big iconic moment that you look back when you're an old man in your rocking chair going, that was it, what would you say?
What, from my time or
from your time? From your time.
The best thing I remember, people have asked, I remember walking onto the Millennium Falcon for the first time. I mean, I walked onto it when it was still being built, and it was this sort of wooden thing, and it was okay. Then when it was finished, we walked on, and that was goosebumpy. Yeah. And then on top of that, I remember we had a meeting with JJ we were talking about Snoke and Maz, and they were shooting on the Millennium Falcon, and it was like, right, after the Millennium Falcon, we're going to meet we often had little meetings in pop-up tents on the side of the stage, and we're going to have a meeting about that. Fine. And they went, actually, let's have the meeting here, on the Millennium Falcon. We'll all sit around the little table, the chess table. So
Wow.
And there's a Tops card of that moment now as well.
Yeah?
Yeah. So there's me and Neil and a couple of other concept artists.
Brilliant.
Glyn Dillon, who was the costume designer on Rogue One, he was a concept artist. He did Kylo Ren. So we're all sitting there with JJ, and we walked out of that meeting going, that was the weirdest meeting I've ever had.
Do we take it that you were a fan when you were a child?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. I never had any of these ships though. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I only had the little figures, but I remember making a lot of ships out of cardboard.
Yeah. And so it began.
Yes. Yeah. And design. I used to just draw ships all the time. I went through all the letters of the alphabet, did it all. You know.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Just taking the letter as the...
Yeah, and just made all these ships about the whole alphabet.
You could sell that in the store.
I wish I knew where those drawings were now. I really do.
Just to let you know, X-Wing, Y-Wing, A-Wing and B-Wing have already been done.
Okay.
Right.
One other thing that does bother me, though, about X-Wings is that they don't have our alphabet.
That's true.
Yes.
That's very true.
That is...
Why have I never thought of that? Like 40...
They have Orabeth.
They got Orabeth.
So but they don't say X-Wing, do they, in the films?
I don't know, do they?
I don't think anyone says the word X-Wing in Star Wars, certainly.
I can't think.
I don't know. That's terrible. That feels like... I'm looking at my friend in the crowd. Do you know if anybody ever verbally says X-Wing?
They're not even speaking English, so to translate it is...
See, there's the fudge answer.
We'll go with that.
Brilliant. Jake, thanks for giving us a bit of your time.
Absolute
Really appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jake.
We'll see you again.
It's all right. Cheers, mate. Thank you, pal.
Lots of connections. Obviously, Lambda-Class Shuttle being from Return of the Jedi, all the links that we've got there, there's plenty going on in and around that film, and so many classic vehicles. For what we talk about in Start Your Engines, and we'll just riff on this a little bit, because I'm literally making this up as I go along.
Really?
Yeah. You've recorded with me before, you know this. That goes out the window. You see the Lambda-Class at the beginning, you see a classic Star Destroyer, you meet the new Death Star. You know, Jedi is the film when you look back at it, there's not a huge amount. I mean, I suppose if you drill into it a bit, there's quite a bit of new stuff in Empire, but there's a heck of a lot of new stuff in Jedi. Yeah. And this is back when, as we said earlier, you weren't getting new stuff all the time. So when a TIE Interceptor turns up, that's a big deal. We've talked about the Imperial Shuttle, but how did you feel about some of the other new vehicles that rocked up? How did you feel about when the A-Wing, which we will talk about in a future episode, so please subscribe, cheap pop. How did you feel about that vehicle when that turned up? Because I have a theory about the A-Wing.
Okay, right. So the X-Wing is called that because it's an X shape, The B-Wing, I can't quite get the shape B in it, but I'm sure it's there somewhere.
Yeah.
The Y-Wing, get that. Now with the A-Wing, do you remember a range of snacks that were around at the time? Space Raiders.
Space Raiders, they're still around.
There was one that was the shape almost of an A-Wing, and that's all I could get him. I couldn't get it out of my head. They've brought out a crisp as a Return of the Jedi, and that's all I could think. No, it's a crisp. I mean, what was interesting about that from the original toy line is that, well, the actual vehicle was never released until it came out as part of the Droids TV series, I think.
It wasn't. Actually, I think you could be right. I don't think it did come out for Jedi. It did come out for Droids.
Yeah, and the figure only came out as part of the last 17. Which the Holy Grail.
You got the B-Wing earlier, but you didn't get the A-Wing.
Yeah.
That's a good shout.
Yeah, but it almost felt a bit too generic for me. The A-Wing. I like the B-Wings.
The B-Wing was way out there, wasn't it? Yeah. But I tell you, I love the A-Wing. I think it's a funky little ship. But the reason it never, and this is retroactive, you've seen episodes of other shows set before Star Wars when you saw A-Wings, and I always thought, how can you introduce, because the great thing about Jedi was when you went from Empire to Jedi, it felt like all of a sudden the Imperial fleet have introduced TIE Interceptors and they've introduced A-Wings and introduced B-Wings, and then you learn that they were around all the time. And my logic was, even when I sort of started looking back at this, was, well, why wouldn't you send an A-Wing down the Death Star trench? It's the smallest little fighter. It's
got less things to clip.
Yeah. You'd send a little A-Wing there, wouldn't you?
Would.
It's too fast.
Yeah.
Here's where to find Fantha Tracks during Star Wars Celebration Europe.
You can find Fantha Tracks in the fan displays area across the whole event, near to the Galactic Senate stage in the North Hall if you're there, Or if you spot a Fantha Tracks shirt on the show floor, be sure to come on over and say hi. On Saturday, 8th April from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., Good Morning Tatooine, hosted by Brian Cameron with co-host Florian Bohr from Jedi Bibliotech, will be on the Holonet News Stage, room 17, along with very special guest author Adam Christopher. Also, on Saturday, 8th April from 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m., Desert Planet Discs, hosted by Carl Bayless and Greg Robertson, will be on the Galactic Senate stage, bringing the fan-made music of the Star Wars galaxy to the XL, focusing on Return of the Jedi, with some very special guest panelists. Saturday evening, on the River Thames, we'll see Fantha Tracks take part in Sail Barge to Celebration, a sold-out clubs-only ticketed event that is sure to bring a few surprises. On Sunday, 9th April, from 2:30 p.m. to 3:30 p.m., Start Your Engines, hosted by Paul Naylor and Mark Newbold, will be on the Holonet News Stage, room 14. And just 2 hours later, from 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m., on the same stage, we'll see the return of Making Tracks Live, with your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster. Hashtag Cantina returns Sunday night to the Indigo at the O2. And Fantha Tracks are your host for the VIP after party with guest DJ Atomic Blonde. If you have tickets, be sure to attend, as this is where you have a great chance of spotting some very famous faces from the galaxy far, far away, right in the crowd. Finally, on Monday, 10th April, from 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m., Planet Leia, hosted by Claire Henry and Johanna Nebielios, will be on the Holonet News Stage, room 17.
Have fun, and remember, Fantha trackers are everywhere.
Mr. Paul Bateman, would you come and join us, sir? I'm going to do the same thing to you as I did to Jake.
What's that?
I'm going to make you introduce yourself, because I'll say it all wrong.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not doing well so far. I was at the wrong building. Where's Mark? Yeah.
I'm always the place that I shouldn't be.
No, you're not. I was. Nice to meet you all. My name's Paul Bateman. I was part of Rebel Force Radio for many, many years. Still occasionally pop up when they let me, if they record before 3 in the morning.
3 in the morning, yeah.
I work for the Ralph McQuarrie estate. I used to restore his artwork, do a lot of work for Lucasfilm. I now work as a concept designer and art director, like Jake, but slightly less successfully. So I think that about covers it, isn't it?
I think that about covers it.
Yeah.
We're talking about Jedi, of course. Ralph's work and influence is all over that film.
Yeah.
When you think of Jedi, and you think of Ralph specifically, what are the big connections you think of? Obviously, he did some pre-production art. He wasn't on it all the way through.
Yeah.
But his influence is right there.
Well, I know it was the artwork that Ralph was least fond of, because I think a lot of it was not coming straight out of his head. A lot of it was painted from photographs and stills and things like that. So he wasn't quite as excited about that because he didn't stay on it for quite as long. But for me, it's always, the Jabba's barge and the speeder bikes and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, he could just do all this stuff almost by accident. He's such a talented guy that I think even though he wasn't on there for very long, he did an awful lot of vehicular stuff. Yeah.
So what's your involvement with Ralph McQuarrie?
Well, I used to work for his estate. When Ralph was still with us, he had Parkinson's disease. Yeah. And I was always a bit of a Ralph impersonator, kind of a bit of a Ralph wannabe, but nobody's quite up to his standard. Yeah. And so I ended up working for his estate, like and restoring his artwork and
remastering it and.
Well, not exactly. I wouldn't get in there with a paintbrush and wreck it, but digitally and because I'm old enough to be like a geriatric and I used to actually paint pictures with acrylics. I was that weird hybrid of a technology guy who works like in concept design. But I came out of print originally, so I knew what paints Ralph used, and I could kind of go, that computer file needs to look like this, and so I kind of filled in the gaps, and we just got on famously. So it became part of that family. And
so you're like the master of Pantone.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
And so I always remember you telling me a story years ago about Ralph when he would draw.
Yeah.
And I guess the sense of not being precious about things. He would draw and it it was there, that was it. But you told me that there was a time when he found a literal wodge of sketches. Was it beyond a boiler or something?
Yeah, they were doing up his study, and Ralph by this point wasn't painting anymore, but there was artwork kind of stacked everywhere. And one day they were moving the boiler, and behind the boiler was this enormous folder. We were like, Ralph, what's in this folder? And he's like, oh yeah, that's a load of storyboards I did for a Pepsi commercial with Michael Jackson. Like, what? And he just neglected to mention there were about 1,000 drawings of Michael Jackson behind this thing. Wow. So we got it out, and we were like, and we'd been doing the website for years, so we'd always kind of say this is the source for Ralph's art. We've got everything. And then every few months we'd be like, what's this? Sorry, we thought we had everything, but we've just found a load more. But the very first time I ever touched any of Ralph's artwork, I was in a car in Berkeley, and I was handed a big pile of his artwork, and the very top of the pile was a sketch of E.T., and it had some notes by Spielberg that was, you can always tell Stephen's writing because it's really bad. It actually spells really badly, and it's quite a scrawl, it's quite surprising. And it just said, I like this guy, Ralph, and it was an arrow pointing at E.T. And then in the next moment, I was handed a giant, soda, American-style soda with no lid, and I'm in a car on a hill like this. And they goes right, we're off. And I'm like, uh-oh. And I just had this vision in my head, I'm just going to get soda over this, artistic history. So I looked at my better half, Athena, and said, if this soda goes, it's going over you. It's not going over the art. She's like, bring it. No problem. So, yeah.
Don't get soda on the Yoda.
No. Oh, very good. Yeah.
So how intimidating, in the nicest sense, is that when you're handed the work of, in the Star Wars world, the master of Star Wars design, and you have the capacity to visually, for future people, enhance it to the best sense. Do you know what I mean? You're not changing anything, but there's a responsibility. That's what.
Yeah. Well, Ralph, obviously nowadays, when you're painting a file, it's nearly always painted electronically, so you can revise it as many times as you like. You might have 50 versions of the same image, and you can change and change and change. But obviously in Ralph's day, he would paint something and he'd actually paint over it. Which for me is like, no, you can't paint over it, but you'd take a slide, and some of those slides were in a really, really poor state of decay, so that's why it took a long time for us to put out. There are several images, for instance, of 3PO and R2 in the desert, and the images that we had that were on celluloid had decayed to such a degree that it was hardly, you could barely see anything. So we had to get the contrast levels right, get the colours back up to what they used to be, and then we could kind of share it with everybody what 3PO used to look like in the first paintings. But yeah, it's terrifying, And then going to Ralph, is this right? Am I completely wrong? And but generally I kept him happy. So.
And what was the biggest surprise that you found when you're going through this stuff? I'm assuming because he was dipping into conversations before.
That's all right.
I used the phrase when I spoke to you about Ralph before, and it was meant in the best sense. I think I said prolific. And that kind of denoted that he was rushing, which wasn't what I meant, but he did do so much work. Did you forget some of the stuff that he'd done? And did you ever come across something, apart from the Michael Jackson stuff, did you ever come across something that you were like, whoa?
Not so much. He'd already done so much stuff. He was so... he talk about making you feel like a non-achiever, thousands and thousands of images. And the thing with Ralph that was always nice that a lot of people don't realise is that Ralph would really if I try and... I'm very influenced by Ralph, not just artistically, but in terms of how he was with people, and he was very modest, and he'd kind of... He'd do things and he'd overthink a thing. So when, for example, on the Yavin base, when you've got all the X-Wings in there and stuff, you'll notice in some of the paintings are floating, or some of the initial sketches. And George said, what's this note? And he said, well, I imagine that the stones in the Yavin base are from another planet that's low gravity, and that they're kind of exuding this field, and that basically it means that anything they push underneath this hangar is going to be able to float. And George is just kind of going, right? He's like, well, I think they've got repulsor beams, Ralph. Don't think about it, doesn't matter, But Ralph was trying to figure it all out, how the doors work, and he wanted to know, or wanted to understand it and have it all make sense,
And he had an internal logic of certain elements of Star Wars that would be consistent throughout.
Yeah, for him it was a very real thing, I think, and if I try and do that with a director now, they generally kind of go, stop thinking, just draw the picture, old monkey, it's like, stop thinking. But with Ralph, he just liked to get into it to that degree. You know, he was really fascinated by the whole world and wanted it to be really realistic. You know, a lot of people kind of tend to think that his artwork was based on Vietnam, but he was out in Korea in the war and stuff like that. So most of the military influence on his artwork is actually that kind of like when he was 20, he was out in Korea for 2 years, and so a lot of the early Star Wars look was actually kind of American military equipment from when he was 20. You know,
and that kind of fits in with George Lucas's idea of the Vietnam War being represented by the Ewoks, etc.
Yeah, I mean Ralph was very modest. I remember saying to him once about because he once said to me he wished that he'd done something that was more personal. You know, and for me that made me feel a bit sad knowing Ralph like I did, because I was like, well, Star Wars couldn't be more personal, and most people understand your footprints are all over this. You know, this is you. But I think for him, he felt like when George spoke to him and said to him, like, for example, he said to him, the only description he had for stormtroopers was, he said, I want a skeletal-looking, scary space soldier. But that was it. So Ralph thought black and white, looks like a skeleton. And we ended up with modern, stormtroopers that we all know now. Yeah. But I mean, if you gave that to 100 guys, you get 100 totally different ideas. You know, they didn't look anything like each other. Mm. So I don't think Ralph truly understood his own value. I think he thought any artist could do that, but we spent like the whole time we were with him, like just kind of going, no, it's all you. You know, George just said something, but it's all you. It's you.
He was pivotal in the whole deal coming together.
Yeah. I went to his house once and we were sitting there chatting away, and he didn't have a lot of Star Wars stuff actually in his house like you might think. All he had was an R2-D2 cookie jar in his kitchen. That was it. And a friend, it might have even been you, Mark, rang me at his house, and the phone went, and it went, R2. And the look he gave me was like, you sad. And I was like, fancy having that. And I was like, what? Come on, you know, I'm allowed to be geeky. You know? I was like, no. So.
And what was he like as a man? You say he was modest, very modest, and he had experiences. Older gentlemen like that, living through wars, had different experiences and different, world views, if you like. But how was he as a man? How was he to deal with one-to-one?
It was amazing. I mean, obviously Ralph had a lot of difficulties talking once I got to know him because of Parkinson's, but that's why he stopped going to the convention circuit, because I don't know if you've ever known anybody with Parkinson's, but they get prone to get quite nervous around strangers. Yeah. So what we would try and do is like kind of interact as much as possible before the conventions, and then I'd turn up as a sort of like rubbish substitute for Ralph, and if anybody had any questions, I'd normally ask him so many questions about stuff I could kind of fill him in. But he was always just so, I mean, it's one thing saying, it's modest, but like I saw some sketches he did once for a Pepsi commercial, and it was working on it with Sid Mead, the guy who designed Blade Runner and Aliens, and in the notice it said, maybe you should ask Sid to draw the spaceships because I'm not very good at them and Sid's better. And I'm thinking like, this is the guy who designed the Close Encounters Mothership and like stuff for Star Trek and E.T. and he thought he wasn't great at spaceships. It was like, it's crazy.
Now, Paul mentioned the A-Wing earlier.
Oh yeah.
And am I right in saying that Ralph designed Buck Rogers?
Well, he was doing stuff for Battlestar Galactica, and it was some leftover Colonial Viper designs that ended up jumping because when they bought that,
Glenn A. Larson stuff, wasn't it?
He still owned it. So, but I mean, Ralph worked on so much stuff. I tried to. I mean, my two claim to fame to Ralph is I introduced him to Miyazaki because I thought he would love it, and a lot of his early sketches that he did when he was fighting in Korea were very whimsical and quite like
And that's the artist we lost very recently.
Yeah, very anime-ish. Yeah. And so I thought he would like Miyazaki, and he did. Yeah. But I was going to do a double bill. I was going to do Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, and a triple bill, and then play him the Holiday Special, because Ralph designed the Holiday Special. And but he said to me, "Isn't that supposed to be like rubbish?" And I said, "Yeah, it's not very good, Ralph." And he goes, why do we want to watch it then? I was like, well, you designed it, Ralph. Wouldn't you like to see what Kashyyyk turned out like and things like that? And he was like, no. I was like, okay, we'll forget that then. But I was like, I was nearly the guy that got Ralph to watch the Holiday Special, but no, he was too smart for me to give in. Yeah, right. There you go.
Nothing wrong with the design of that
backtrack.
Design, no, yeah.
I'm waggling, but that's good for podcasting, isn't it? I'm waggling my finger at you, that's good. So yourself, I mean, obviously, fan from childhood, as go through all the iterations of being a fan, as many of us do in our own individual ways, which is what makes Star Wars so awesome. And then you move into this career. I mean, you've done other stuff. Well, pivot to that. Revenge of the Sith.
Oh God, yeah,
You play a Mon-Cal character in a
play.
very important scene. Yes.
Yeah, that's a stretch. Play. Yeah. I got a call. You know, it's a very small community, really, the film community in London. So we all kind of know each other and stuff. And I got a call from an agent who said, "Paul, would you like to be in Revenge of the Sith? Because this guy from Australia who's playing this character, it's just not worth flying him over, you know. And you've got the same measurements, and you look kind of similar." So I was thinking, is it going to be like a character that's, you see the face, you know? And then, but as it turned out, Paul, what's the guy's name who played character in Australia? You must know. Paul. Anyway.
Yeah, I know him.
So it was Mina Tills, the fish-headed character who's now female, right?
Yes.
Because of the cartoon. But when I played this character, I swear it was a guy, right? So I think maybe I'm the first trans character in Star Wars, I think.
Claim it.
But, you know. But so I get this call out of the blue, turn up and put a fish head on, you know. So I'm there thinking, this is great. Like,
Now, when he said you looked like him, did he mean the actor or the character?
well, the odd thing was, I must have looked enough like him, because I confused George on the very first day. They were shooting pickups in the UK, which is mostly blue screen. And I turned up on set early in the morning, and George is a very efficient director. He likes to get there really early. So we're there, and normally you can count on, like, if you're working for Ridley Scott, you can count on him being ready about 1, 2 in the afternoon, and you've been there since 4, you know. So, like, when's Ridley going to turn up? And he's busy, like, painting the environment with smoke and stuff like that. But when you work with George is ready before you've turned up, and he's like, come on, let's get going, you know. So we immediately sort of started shooting on set. But when he saw me, and he saw the beard and the hair and the fat hippie guy dressed as a fish, and he went, oh, that's probably Paul from Australia, you know. So he went, morning, Paul. So I went, morning, George. And obviously he heard the voice isn't Australian, and he went, you know, wait.
So you're a good actor.
Who's that guy? Yeah. So, yeah. But it was a very surreal day, because Dave Elsey did the makeup and stuff, like I know Dave and stuff, and we just spent the entire day talking about Peter Cushing. You know, it's very odd, because he was going to have to do the Peter Cushing makeup for the end of the Sith. But it was a really surreal moment, because I have a nephew. It's a long story, but the short version is he has like a quadruple barrel name, and his middle name is like Luke Skywalker and stuff. So I'm Luke Skywalker's uncle. So I rang him from set and said, you're not going to believe what I'm looking at right now. And he was like, what? I said, I'm looking at Anakin Skywalker smoking a cigarette next to 3PO. He was like, you're joking. I was like, no, seriously. But I couldn't put the camera on them and kind of go, here, look, you know. It's like, but,
so the kid in you must have been doing cartwheels then. When you get to be on a set is amazing.
Getting a massive nerd on, yeah, totally, you know, because it's one of these things where often as an art director or a concept guy, you know, you're not always put on set, you know. I mean, like, I know Jake, you know, clearly spends a lot of time designing and stuff, and frequently doesn't get on set, you know. So I used to just do extra work occasionally because I thought it would be fun, and it gets you out of the cabin fever of just, you know, being wrapped up in your own drawings all the time. And, you know, my better half, Athena, would push me out the door like, go. Like, lose weight, you know. Don't just sit at the drawing board all day. Go and get amongst people.
Try
and remember.
walking. I'm the same.
Yeah, remember how to communicate, you know. So, yeah, it was good fun. But we did 4 days on it, so that was a laugh.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of sets, but there were lots of, like, the kind of floor panels that you get, because obviously when they comp it all in, sometimes it's easier to just, like, you know, incorporate a floor that's actually there, because they don't have to recreate the shadows and stuff like that. Yeah. So me being the house nerd, I was like, going, that's a bit of Kashyyyk, that's a bit of, like, Naboo, that's a bit of this and that, you know. Just like, if I just run across those tiles, I've been to now Naboo, Kashyyyk, Mustafar, you know, I've got to do it. And they're all going, what are you doing? Why are you walking on those tiles? Don't worry.
So you must have had a bit of a kick then the other week on Mandalorian when you go back to the Galaxy's Opera House. Were you looking for yourself on the steps?
Yeah, right. No, it was strange. Those masks are like, I think most people assume they know what it's like to wear like an animatronic mask, but it's kind of a lot weirder than you think it is. Yeah. Like especially because I didn't know who Mina Tills was. I mean, we still don't really know, you know. But I was thinking, I'm going to get to play a calamari. That'll be fun. I was thinking maybe it's Admiral Akbar's granddad or something, or grandma now, you know. But,
oh yeah.
But
is there an action figure? Yeah, there is this action figure, isn't it? Yeah.
But you put it on, and the ones that are actually like, I mean, most of the masks are not, they don't move, but the ones that have got built-in animatronics, if you can imagine balancing a typewriter on your head, that's kind of what it feels like. And when they start working, all you can hear is like whir, click, 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 whir, click, click, click. Yeah. And you look out of the mouth. So you're a fish with these giant eyes, but you're actually looking out of the mouth like that, trying not to fall over, It's the strangest.
How many people get to say you're a fish with
giant eyes? Yeah, it's good fun.
And doing the film like that and moving into other stuff, am I right in saying you did a bit of design work that was seen on screen in episode 7, some of the...
Well, it was a weird one, because it was like I got a call when I was out at Essen, of all things, and it was from a friend of mine, Gavin, who was an art director on Moon. And
just to say, Essen was great for you, because you did the Steiner, didn't you? That was when you did the Lucasfilm.
Yeah, they asked me to finish off some Ralph's art for something.
Raiders Castle?
Yeah, they sold out. They'd only give me one of them. I was like, you got me joking? I spent ages painting that. They're like, no, one, that's it. That's all you're getting. Yeah. But I got a call out of the Blue saying, would you like to design or work on episode 7? And I was like, what's the situation? And I don't know if you realise, but Star Wars, when George was in charge, obviously it was always in-house. It was all like ILM and all the people you see on all the DVDs, they're the folks that were doing it all. But when the sequel started, they decided it might actually be quite more affordable if they could kind of farm some of it out. So a lot of different, companies tried to get various gigs. So you've got one company that's trying to do the makeup, a different company that's doing the hoods, all the heads-up displays and computer displays. So I got called in to work on that. But there were several people that were tenured to do it. So we had no idea if any of the work was going to finish up in it. But all we knew is they wanted to stay away from the prequels. They wanted to have a real sequel-y vibe. And a lot of the artists and art directors on it were very young. So they didn't really know the visual language. So I was kind of tasked to kind of go around the art department, kind of going too prequely, not sequel, not
You're a
not OT enough, and fix odd things. Like there's a guy who was doing an animation of where was it? Yavin 4, and it was like Mustafar. It was all fiery, and I was going, no, it's a gas giant. It's supposed to be a cloud, So I got him to redo the animation and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was fun. But we did all kinds of... So initially, we weren't told an awful lot. We were just given a broad idea of what it would be like. Yeah. And at first, there was, they were very secretive, because obviously they didn't know which companies were going to get the gig. So they said to us, all we really kind of knew was okay, there are good guys and bad guys. It's a bit like the Empire and the Rebellion again. But the Empire's dissolved and it's kind of coming together. So they asked me to do a bunch of stuff that was kind of iconography and designs that were redesign all the Imperial logos, and you get the pill stripes and all that kind of stuff. Because the Empire was shattered, I designed all these windows that were a lot like Palpatine's window, but kind of like a broken version of it. So it was almost like all these shattered pieces of glass that kind of went out, fractured, and things like that. And new badges and stuff like that, but none of it landed. So
just to say, and this is no good for a podcast, but I'm going to roll my sleeve up.
Oh, yeah.
This dude designed my tattoo. So that's how good he is at doing...
I didn't know it was a tattoo at the time, but you got a better one than that arm, haven't you?
Oh, I've got a Ralphie on the other arm. So yeah.
A Ralphie.
Great for podcasts. Yeah. Great.
I've got to say, one of the things about Ralph that was amazing was how humble he was in that, I remember him, he had some sketches from, at one point, ILM, like this situation with me in The Force Awakens, they presented a pitch to try and get the visual effects on Total Recall, and this kind of thing happens quite a lot, and one of the part of the package was if you go with us, you get Ralph as part of the deal. So they got him to do a bunch of Total Recall sketches, even though they hadn't landed the effects gig yet. So ILM didn't do the effects for Total Recall, but they still did a bunch of design work. And there was some of his Total Recall artwork was hanging around on the table, just sitting there, and it's these beautiful pictures of Mars, I'd never seen before, and right there, and Ralph's about to put his coffee down right in the middle of it, and it's all dripping, and I just like that with my hands, that's not, if he puts a ring on anything, it's going to be me, not the paper,
So you ended up looking like the guy out of Raiders of the Lost Ark with the imprint.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, but for him it was work, it wasn't a picture for the wall, A lot of people don't realise how creative Ralph was in terms of being I like to think I'm open-minded about artwork, but I'm the first person that goes around the gallery kind of go, that's rubbish, don't like that, that's not proper art, really picky. Whereas Ralph was like wide open to it all. He was like, yeah, this is great in its own way.
He put so much of himself into Yoda as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he thought Yoda was going to be, because Ralph was trying to picture the whole thing before he's got it. And like we all now, we know what everything was like, but he didn't know when he was designing it. And he thought Yoda was going to be like a little Englishman. Yeah. And in his head, I was like, what do you mean, Ralph? And he's like, well, he's little and he's nice and he's got a little house in the woods. And I think he thought it was kind of cute, And he thought Yoda was going to be like making a cup of tea for Luke and, do you want a cup of tea? And I was like, it's not quite how it turned out.
Can you do the voice again, please? Can you do the voice again?
A cup of tea.
Thank you.
Was it tea?
Biscuit with that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Blow me away with that. So modern Star Wars now, it's expanding, it's moving. There's so much stuff happening. So much has been announced here at Celebration, obviously. But with your Ralph McQuarrie head on, if you like, you must be pleased now, increasingly pleased. He gets nods regularly. I'm thinking that the recent episode of Mandalorian, when you see Monument Plaza and the designs there.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love it. And Ralph was very particular about his. I mean, it was kind of strange. Like, there's a lot of action figures out there and things like that you can get in Ralph's style. But I think that really the only thing that he really felt a connection with was the EFX helmet. The Vader.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was because they spent so long with him. I mean, they kept visiting him, so they were over there for like about 9 months, going backwards and forwards, kind of checking he liked it. And Ralph was very particular about it has to look just like that. I mean, that Vader is a case in point. Yeah. We all know Vader as he is now, but Ralph, like when I said to him, "What did you picture?" and he said, "A little guy." I was like, "What, a little guy?" And he thought he was going to be all, like, yeah, like Wicked Witch of the West or something, like, "I'm going to get you, Luke Skywalker."
Like Mr. Burns out of The Simpsons.
Yeah. Right? And it seems crazy now, but back then, I suppose, like anything is possible,
But it seems, as you talk, it seems like he's so invested in the thought process that he's visualising ahead of what's going on the paper. Almost. He kind of was thinking way out of so many more things than what he was able to put out.
Yeah, I mean, Ralph would literally his process was quite fascinating for an artist, if you're into how he went about it. I remember Ralph was one of these, wonderfully talented people, and I struggle with nearly every kind of complex painting I ever do, but Ralph would he'd just sit on the couch, after he's read the script, he'd drift off a little bit, and he said it was like champagne bubbles coming up in his head. He'd just get these ideas form in his head where he'd try and visualise a place, and then he'd spin it around. So as an artist, I'm just going, oh,
that's amazing, isn't it?
How can you do that?
That's really
and
descriptive.
It's like 3D in his head before, we were using 3D to visualise it, But he was such a great. I mean, he was a really good draftsman, so he could draw, complex stuff from every angle.
You mentioned about the perspective line, how he'd work out the perspective line in the specific way that made things work.
Yeah, I mean, he was so good at it. But his fallback job for years was he used to work at Boeing designing aircraft parts catalogues and stuff like that. Yeah. And I remember saying to him, Ralph, I was trying to figure it out for a documentary we were shooting that I was producing and stuff. And I remember saying to him, Ralph, you went back to Boeing about 7 times. What was that about? And he said, well, it was a reliable job. It was when things got quiet on the film side. This is before Star Wars mostly. He said he would just keep going back to this job. And I said to him, yeah, you're into airplanes, aren't you, Ralph? And he was like, yeah, I am. And I said, well, why did you stop? And he said, ellipses. I said, well, what do you mean ellipses? And he said, all the windows on airplanes, he couldn't cheat it or kind of do it half-baked. He had to figure it out properly. And if you're an artist, you can imagine trying to work out why an ellipse goes around a curve. It's quite a trick, and then it's at an angle, and he had to figure all the maths out and everything. So it was he got tired to death of figuring out these ellipses.
Wow!
But he nearly worked on Lord of the Rings on the animated show, years ago. Ralph Baskey called him up and said, "Ralph, would you like to paint backgrounds for Lord of the Rings?" And he thought about it, and I think he just thought all those forests. It's it wasn't really Ralph's scene. He'd do a few, but painting a few hundred forest backgrounds is no, you're right.
I mean, he covered so many what you now call IPs, so many different franchises, a bit in Star Trek, a bit in Battlestar, a bit in Star Wars, a bit in E.T. Did he ever have hankerings to any degree of doing more than what he did, of maybe directing at some point? Was that ever a thought in his head?
Not really. I mean, like I say, you know, I think he felt like he wished he'd done more personal projects. But I mean, his personal art was everywhere. If you went to his place, there was a clock in one of his workrooms, and he'd made the wooden clock, and he'd painted all the doors on it with little pictures, like little frescoes, like beautiful thing. And he'd carved all the ornaments on the top and everything. So this guy was proper, you know, craftsman. Yeah. His house was an arts and crafts movement house, so it was all wooden walls and stuff. And he had this extension on the house. I remember saying, that extension's gorgeous. And it turned out he'd made it. And this thing looked like an old steam train, like carriage, on the outside of his house, you know. And this is in Berkeley, you know, where they're very particular about how you build in Berkeley. And this thing was like a Victorian like train carriage, you know. It was amazing. But he was just so creative. He used to make he made a Spitfire model from scratch. Like, I mean, I'd have a hard time with a model kit, you know, and he's making it from scratch, you know. So he kept doing stuff. But a lot of his personal artwork was mixed media. He did a lot of like stuff that was like collages and things like that. So
do you think that was why he was very open? Like Paul asked, you know, different types of artwork.
Yeah.
Because he was kind of handsy and able to do different things, that he was open to doing, to sort of taking these things in.
Yeah, I mean, he was wide open. I mean, when he was, he was up for doing anything that he thought was interesting. I mean, what I always liked about Ralph was like the interesting little stories that people don't generally get to hear about, you know. And I remember chatting to him and Lorne Peterson too, the ILM head modeler, and I was just curious, you know, because I play music all the time when I work, you know, and I've got to watch what I play because it would change the nature of the art, you know. Because if you're trying to do a nice little pixie and you're listening to Rammstein or something, it's not going to quite turn out the right way, you know. And so I was like, Ralph, what did you listen to when you were painting Star Wars paintings? And he said a lot of Janis Joplin, which surprised me. And Lorne Peterson said Relics, you know, by Fleetwood Mac was out at the time, and so in ILM, like, they all had very different tastes in music, but they were all playing Fleetwood Mac all the time when they were making their very first X-Wings and TIE Fighters and all that. That was their thing. I'm trying to think, there were a few other albums and stuff that escapes me right now, but yeah.
Fascinating. I think we may have run out of time. I could talk all day. I'm glad we've caught up. It's been too long.
Same one.
Thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate it. Tune into Panther Tracks Radio. Subscribe if you fancy. Listen to all our shows, and we've got loads of them. But especially with this good fella here. Oh, there's my alarm telling me the show's over. Thank you everyone. Thank you everyone.
Thanks everybody.
We've got badges. What's here if you want a badge?
Thank you.
Coming up next on Panther Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.